We are going to break down Michigan State football, but not just with any normal guests. No, this is the publisher of one of the greatest preview magazines in college football, Brett Ciancia of Pick Six Previews. Let's go.
You are Locked On Spartans, your daily podcast on the Michigan State Spartans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Spartan friends, Spartan family, Locked On Spartans listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to today's show of Locked On Spartans, your team in green and white 5 days a week. And yes, just like we said right off the top here, we're going to do a preview because, hey, football is coming sooner than we all know it. But we're not going to do it with just, some guest that knows a little bit about college football. No. We got Brett Ciancia of Pick Six Previews. Any college football nerd like myself knows that this man is college football royalty. Brett, thank you so much for your time, man. How on earth are you doing this summer?
Hey, Matt. Well, thanks for having me on. Thanks for that praise right there. Appreciate it. It's been a hectic summer, but it's release week here at Pick Six Previews. So the magazine, the hard copy is being shipped across the country. It's a one-man show, so I'm in here. I'm doing all 69 teams, all Power 5 teams, talking to head coaches, talking to coordinators, watching spring games, running my numbers, but then putting it back into a readable form. So I'll tell you what, though, this is the 12th season I've been doing it. This is the most, the most up and down off season ever. And just this week, we see more realignment happening. So it's been a crazy season. I'm excited to talk 2023 football, though.
If we have time, I would just love to ask you at the end of this, just like how early you start your process. But we'll see, because we got a lot of Michigan State stuff to get to here. Now, hey, like we said, the good news is we have one of the best, if not the best, preview magazine publishers out there. Okay, that's great for us, the listeners. We get a lot of great guests. This is a really cool one. The bad news is, though, of the 69 Power 5 teams, Brett, you're incredibly accurate with your predictions. And unfortunately, Michigan State, you have ranked as number 49th overall. Do you have any sunshine and rainbows to bring us off the top here before we go any further? Or should we just get into the grime of the task at hand for our Spartans here?
Well, for sure. I mean, here's the optimist spin right away is that, Michigan State under Mel Tucker, they were famous for their 2021 transfer haul. A couple seasons back, it was incredible, the roster turnover that he did there, and then they went and they won 11 games. But one quote that stood out to me, I do all kinds of, like I said, research, talking to people. He said that this is the most intriguing and most exciting transfer class he's had yet. And that's high praise when you're comparing that to 2021. So if he's anywhere near correct in that assessment, then this is, they're in for a bowl season. They're in to prove me wrong. So there's your optimist spin. If these transfers click, then they're going to be well ahead of 49th. But, that's coming off of a number 52 finish last year. So slightly notch up from last year's where I have them.
That's the thing. It's like, hey, we're coming off a 5-7 season. A lot of optimism around East Lansing. That air is in the off season, the fall camp. Crisp air right now is hitting us good, but I can't complain too much, I guess. So when it comes to last season, was there a theme, or maybe it's a set of stats for Michigan State that really stuck out to you as not just concerning for last year, but something that you might be worried about could carry into this year for the Spartans?
Yeah, well, I think statistically the two black eyes right away were rushing offense and then pass defense, specifically that pass defense number, second worst in Power 5. And my opponent adjusted numbers really struggled there, and they lose some longtime starters too from that secondary. That's a spot. But here's more of a deeper dive is the play action pass game, because it's kind of derivative from the run game. To set up a play action, You've got to have a dominant run game. They had that with Kenneth Walker, obviously the Doak Walker winner. You lose him. The offensive line was thin in last spring and was thin last fall. You lose a run game, now you can't hit on those home run balls. So I think the number was they dropped from 12 touchdowns to 4 in the play action game. So you saw that. It really crippled the offense. A lot less explosive than they were 2 years ago. And that it just compounded more problems for them.
And with that said, with also the transfer portal stuff, is the guy that you were looking forward to the most with Michigan State as far as transfers go, is it just Nathan Carter? Is it the running back out of UConn? Or is it someone on the other side of the ball, perhaps? Which transfer at Michigan State are you looking forward to seeing the most?
Yeah, I'll throw Carter in there, but I think the defensive line is intriguing, where you have a couple. I know that Chris Bogle was there last year. He's a former top 100 guy, but back from injury. But the A&M transfer along the defensive line, former 5-star, by Job, another former 5-star. So, there's some, at least recruiting-wise, some blue-chip talent coming into that defensive line. And I know that I was catching some flack on Twitter this week. I was releasing the Big Ten unit rankings, and I had Michigan State's D-line a little bit lower than you'd expect. Part of that's the unknowns there. But if that thing clicks, they could move from my 9th place all the way into that top 5. So it's a real tight margin there. And if there's any optimist spin there, I do have the linebackers top 5 in the conference. So that's
saw that. Oh yeah,
yeah. That's moving. That's moving Windman over there. You got Cal Halliday, an all-conference guy. So, and the way that these defenses are set up, where you have these edge guys who are hybrids, I almost want to throw out my D-line versus linebacker and just call it a front 7 and just rank the front 7s. You average those. Michigan State's a pretty solid unit.
Hope so. Yeah, that'd be delightful, especially if we could stay healthy this season. That would just be a world of difference from last year. But hey, you mentioned top 5, and that made me think, hey, Michigan State also made top 5. Well, for Big Ten East teams. Right now, you have them predicted to be the 5th team in the Big Ten East. You have ranked number 1 Michigan, then Ohio State, then Penn State, then Maryland number 4, MSU 5, Indiana 6, Rutgers 7. My question is, how many tiers do you think there are in the Big Ten East? Is it 3 tiers with like Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Maryland, MSU in the 2nd tier, and then Indiana, Rutgers in a 3rd tier? Or are those 4 teams, Maryland, MSU, Indiana, Rutgers, just in a 2nd tier? Like, how do you differentiate these 7 teams here?
Yeah, Matt, you pretty much nailed it. I mean, you nailed my thought process this year. It's tough. It's tough for Michigan State battling with 3 top 10 teams in the division. I think it's the toughest top-heavy division in the country. I could argue Penn State for the playoff. I could argue Ohio State and Michigan. They're all playoff caliber. It's just they all reside in the same division, so they're going to take some losses. But, I started this back in 2012. The front half of that was mostly Michigan State in what I called the top 4, the Big 4 of the Big Ten East. It was those 3 plus Michigan State. Last couple of years, it might be looking like more like a Big 3 at the moment. And I know that Michigan State has all the capacity to get back into that tier. But for right now, I had a battle for 4th between Michigan State and Maryland. And as weird as it sounds, I actually went with Maryland there. I side with their defense. It was a little bit better statistically last year. They bring back more. I like their proven quarterback situation compared to the late spring transition you saw at Michigan State's quarterback spot. And they actually sneakily have a pretty good recruiting profile over at Maryland the last 5 years. So it's tight there, but I agree with you. I'd have that big top 3, playoff caliber top 3, then a 2 middle of the pack, Maryland, Michigan State, and then Indiana, Rutgers way at the bottom.
So Michigan State being in the middle, what's a farther gap? Them in the middle from the top 3 in the Big Ten, or them in the middle with the basement of Rutgers and Indiana? And believe me, I know how ridiculous that question sounds, saying that we just lost to Indiana last year, but if you want to humor me, I mean, what gap is bigger for Michigan State?
Well, it's interesting way to frame it. Which gap? I think let's say what's more likely? Does Michigan State move up into that top 3 tier, or do they fall to maybe a 3-9 or 4-8 season? I think it's more likely this year that they would fall down. They're a couple thin position groups away, some injuries that they could be in for another bad year. I don't see any scenario really. I don't mean to come on here and be the pessimist, but in this division, I don't see any scenario where Michigan State goes 11-1 this year. I mean, I think that's more out there. So I would side with the lower tier right now.
We would need a few scandals to break out across the Big Ten in the next few weeks leading up to kickoff that get teams suspended for the whole year, and then maybe a little more help on top of that. But yeah, the schedule's doing no favors for Michigan State. I mean, everywhere I read, it says MSU top 5 hardest schedule, if not top 3 hardest schedule. But I assume that you are firmly in that camp as well, that this is one of the toughest schedules that you've seen in not just the conference, but the whole nation.
Well, yeah, it started out right away in the East. Like we said, there's a top 3 playoff contenders. So right away, you're playing 3 playoff caliber teams. And then the non-conference, you get another one. I think Washington's playoff caliber. I have them 9th overall in my preview, right there in the Pac-12 title game. So that's 4 top 10 opponents right there out the gate. Then you have some tough crossovers. I mean, Minnesota in late October will be freezing cold up there. They're physical and tough. Nebraska's a mystery team from the West. And Iowa. I mean, going into Iowa is really tough to do, and they have an elite defense again. And so that's 3 tough draws. There's no easy games there from the West Division. And then the East, luckily you get Maryland at home. That's a swing game. You do get home field advantage there. But
Right.
yeah, I agree with you. It's one of the hardest in the conference and thus in the whole country.
And we are going to be right back with Brett here in a hot second. But first, need to talk your ear off about LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have the access to the best qualified candidates available. And that's why you have to go check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. That's my favorite part. All right, guys, just go add your job to your profile. It is so easy that, hey, even your favorite podcast host can do it. After that, add the purple hashtag hiring frame on your profile to spread the word that your company is hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so that you can quickly prioritize who you want to interview and hire. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Again, that is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions, you got that right, buckaroo. They apply. So I want to circle back to your position group rankings here. And this is, one thing that I love reading every single year is how are you going to stack up the position groups around the conference. We're going to start with offense. It's like hey, give me the good news, give me the bad news. We'll start with the bad news because offense, quarterback in the conference. This is not nationally, everyone. In the conference, you have quarterback ranked at 11th. Running back, you have ranked 10th. The wide receiver, tight ends, 12th. And then, hey, the offensive line, 7th. Okay, so right that baseline average right there. Brett, can you give me a reason to smile about the offense? Because those were a lot of high numbers I just gave. Obviously, we're going to talk about the issues here. But before that, any redeeming qualities with this offense, just from your point of view?
Yeah, there's plenty of good qualities. I think that the shocking story that came out there was after spring ball, seeing the 2-year starting quarterback transfer out. And I understand there was definitely more of a position battle than you'd expect when you hear two-time captain, two-time starter. So that might have just been a position battle lost, meaning you have someone better coming up. So there's an optimist spin there. The one I can't really spin optimistically would be the receiver loss. Losing Keon Coleman, that's really tough, especially packaged with losing Jaden Reed. That's 2 all-conference guys gone. It's funny how, I released the book a lot later than the ones on newsstands. So I already had I had Keon Coleman penciled in on my first team all Big Ten. And then he picks up and leaves. Now I got him on the all ACC team. So that was crazy there. Here's your redeeming quality is the offensive line. I think that Michigan State's in for a big bounce back in the trenches. I talked a little bit, but I remember it was last spring, so 2022 spring. They were so thin at offensive line, they couldn't even go 2 deep in spring ball. You saw that reflected in the fall. They struggled. But I think now you get 3 starters back, overall better depth and quality and better health. And that's going to unlock more of a run game and then the play action. So all that's derivative from the offensive line improvement.
That was a great lesson all of us State fans learned last year. It's like, hey, you guys have a lot of hurt people in spring ball. It's like, football's in a few months. Who cares? It'll all be okay. And then, Brett, it certainly was the furthest thing from okay last year. We learned how important health is year-round, around the calendar. You did mention your all-conference teams, and you named a first team, you named a second team. Now, on offense, well, after those rankings, it goes without saying that no Spartans made your first or second team all-conference preseason team. However, was there anyone close for you? Is there anyone that you had an eye on? You're like, yeah, I could see it. I'm just not ready to do it yet.
Well, yeah, it's a shame with Coleman because, like I said, he was already in there. I had him locked in. I was really impressed with him last season, but especially in the spring. That's a big loss there. The offensive linemen, that's a position group that's definitely harder to do. All my numbers grade them out as a unit and as a team, so looking individually is tougher, but you have some headliners there. I wouldn't be surprised if a couple break through in the postseason. With I think you got three full timers back: Duplain, Samick, Spencer Brown, even the number 1 interior lineman, Keyshawn Blackstock. So there's plenty of names in the trenches. Maybe one emerges there. Quarterback, it's tough to break through. I mean, there's so many big names. I can't argue there. And maybe if Nathan Carter comes in and excels, he could break through. But again, look at running back in this conference. It's so deep. Right. You could argue it's the 4 best running back pairs, not just running backs, but pairs in the country. So it's hard to break through in first off a 14-team conference and then one that has 3 playoff teams. So it's tough.
No, it is. No question about it. And also, well, I can't let you go without talking about quarterbacks, of course. Hey, 2 years ago, there was a quarterback competition here in East Lansing. It was Anthony Russo. It was Payton Thorne. And Brett, if I remember correctly, you nailed it in your preview magazine that it's looking like it is going to be Thorne. So with that said, do you have a crystal ball around that you can look into and see who's going to be the week 1 starter for Michigan State between Katin Hauser and Noah Kim? Do you have a hunch on that?
Yeah, well, no, thanks for bringing that back up because that was one of my better calls that year. And
that was great.
Because Russo was coming in from Temple. I'm based out of about an hour outside of Philadelphia where Temple's located. And all the locals, I remember complaining for the whole season, oh, this Russo's turning the ball over so much. So then when I hear the national guys being like, oh, Michigan State got a good one in Russo, and not to knock the guy, but I remember hearing those rumblings about the turnovers, and I was like, you know what, give me Payton Thorne. Give me what's behind door number 2. So, yeah, that hit. But, yeah, quarterback this year, I'm shocked. I mean, you see a 2-time starter, 2-time captain. I know his stats fell a little bit last year, but to see him leave post-spring was pretty shocking. So, yeah, I heard rumblings that Hauser was pushing him for the starting role, even that Noah Kim was pushing. I mean, you have a dual-threat talent there, younger, but I think both are going to get on the field. I think maybe at the very least get Noah Kim some wildcat looks or some dual-threat looks. But I can't predict that one for you. This is going to be a fall camp battle, probably into September as well. You know, this might be settled in the Central Michigan and the Richmond games, and then have a real named starter heading into Washington.
That's exactly how I think it's going to map out. I mean, I don't see it going any other way, quite frankly. I mean, I think Kim has a slight edge right now, but I don't think it's far enough. And also, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. You might want to also keep your former 4-star quarterback healthy, or not healthy. Yeah, healthy, but also happy in Katin Hauser. And, like, don't just tell me he's lost the job before the season even starts. But, again, that's politics and all that fun with college football here. Switching to the defense, a little better numbers here with your positional rankings. Defensive line, number 9. You talked a little bit about that, how that could rise a little bit. Linebackers, number 5 in the conference. And then secondary, number 12, which I got to say, like, if there's any complaint to have about that, it's like, I'm actually happy we're not 13th or 14th. So thank you for that. Because, oh boy, it's been tough sledding here in East Lansing. But yeah, what is the defensive line what you're getting the most flack for from Spartan fans, or is there another position group that you're catching a little bit more on?
Yeah, probably defensive line. And it's one of those deals where the conference is so deep at defensive line. So I do a national top 15 unit rankings too, not just the conference. And the Big Ten placed 5 into the national top 15. So you got, what do you got? Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Illinois is in the top 5, Iowa. So the conference is really deep right away. But from there, it's kind of thin going from 8th, 9th, 10th, that whole range. I have them well ahead of the bottom feeders, but and here's one difference is that Jacoby Widman, that really swings the vote a little bit because I know he's an edge guy. I think he started the season out at defensive end. He, put up a few sacks, and then they rotated him to outside backer. So in my book and while I've been evaluating, I have him at backer. So you see that big boost there in the linebackers ranking, pushing up to number 5 in the conference. So, but yeah, outside of that, there's a lot of uncertainties, but blue chip ratings. And if they can convert that, and I know they have a really strong defensive staff and especially a defensive line. So I wouldn't be surprised if they do prove me wrong. It's just a little bit uncertain right now. And I think the strength, the real core of the defense is at the linebacker tier.
For sure. And so, because, look, the pass defense, I mean, it has been long storied that it has been struggling. Do you think it's kind of a perfect marriage between, like, what the front 7 was doing last year and the secondary? Or was it kind of more towards, like, oh, yeah, it's actually definitely, like, the 4 guys in the secondary here?
Well, it's tough because those guys were proven names and they were longtime starters. Right. And so you never expect it to be that bad. I think it's a total package deal. I mean, it's pass rush factors into pass coverage and vice versa. So it is a little bit more nuanced than just, you see the bad pass number and it's the secondary's fault. I think it's everything. Could be a little bit of scheme too. Maybe they're going to adjust the scheme a little bit. It is very strange to see Michigan State rated so poorly in the secondary and in the pass defense stats. When I started this thing, it was during the no-fly zone era back D'Antonio, Narduzzi, and just I think number 1 in the country, number 1 in almost a decade. So to fall all the way down to almost dead last is crazy to see. So I think they're in for a bounce back overall as a defense. It's just a matter of how big that jump is.
And I want to swing around to different Big Ten teams right now. I have a good idea of what to expect from 12 of the teams in the conference. Unfortunately, the other two are two teams Michigan State plays this year. I cannot get a read on Minnesota. I cannot certainly get any read on Nebraska with the whole, regime change with Matt Rule. What kind of a team? I'll start with Minnesota. Like, what kind of a team are the Gophers going to be this year? Are they going to be a plus team, or do you expect a kind of a drop off for them from last year?
Well, last year, my numbers had them 24th nationally in my game grader, good for 5th in the Big Ten. I see a decline there. I don't think they're going to match that. I have them dropping from 24 down to 36 nationally. I have them 4th in the Big Ten West. With all that said, it's going to look like a whole new look Minnesota. Traditionally, you think of Minnesota with the huge offensive line and Mo Ibrahim, the power running back, and he was getting 30 carries a game, grinding down the time of possession. This time it flips around. The strengths are now at the receiver spot. The quarterback has a bigger arm than they had, and they're going to air it out more than they had. It's weird when you look back at their run-to-pass ratio. They're almost at the service academy's level for heavy run percentage. Wow. But I think that starts to flip back. They're going to be more balanced, and they're going to air it out. So, and then on defense, Joe Rossi, he does it every year. I mean, he continues to reload this thing. This time around, though, they do lose some longtime starters. Some of their most proven names are gone. So I see a slight slide back for Minnesota from competing in the West down to more of a middle tier. It's going to be tough to go into Minnesota, though. Like I said, late October, freezing cold. And I'm sure by then they'll have figured out their offensive line and be churning away. So, yeah, it's a tough opponent.
If we could just move that game to where the Vikings play, just have it climate controlled, I feel a little better. But yeah, it's going to be Big Ten weather, no question. Nebraska, is that just, even as someone as as much of an expert as you are, is it just like a throw your hands up in the air and be like, I'll let you know by mid-October how I feel about this team, because I cannot get a single read on the Huskers.
Yeah, well, I'd say they're one of the mystery teams this whole season, and there's a lot of factors into that statement. I mean, first off, you look at their recruiting profile the last 5-10 years. On paper, they should be the best team in the division recruiting-wise. I mean, they're top 25 every year. The problems have been development. The strength and conditioning program was weak under Scott Frost, player development, and then also player retention. I mean, all their best – you see these recruiting stats, they all leave. So, so now, so fast forward to 2023, it's a whole new staff. You have Matt Rule coming back to the college game. He's getting back to brass tacks and really speaking their language out in Nebraska, where it's about power football, some option from quarterback, a dual threat quarterback, a commitment to the weight room again, and commitment to the walk-on program, all the buzzwords. So, of course, the fan base is excited out there. The question is, can the offensive line finally get it together? They're blue chip players on paper from the recruiting ranks, but have not gelled at all, have not clicked. So, and you look back at Matt Rule's tenures when he's fixed Temple, he fixed Baylor. It always took until the third season. It was a bad first year and a 500 second year, and then they won the conference in the third year. So the question will be, in this transfer portal era, does that accelerate the rebuild? Could it be the first year impact, or is it going to be second year? So all that to say, they're a mystery team. I've got them 5th. Got them ranked right near Michigan State nationally, though.
Gotcha. Okay. So with all that said, the hard schedule, the offense, the defense, the question marks, yada, yada, yada. Right now, Vegas has the over-under at 5.5 wins for Michigan State. What do you think the ceiling is for this Spartan team? Like, let's say everything that you think that could go right does go right. What do you think the record can be at the end of the year with the ceiling?
Oof. Well, right away you look at 4 top 10 opponents, and I don't think Michigan State's ceiling is cracking into that tier. So I'll chalk up 4 losses right away. And then let's just say you sweep the rest, and that's even a tall task. I mean, that's going into Iowa, that's taking care of Nebraska, Minnesota, the bottom tier, Indiana, Rutgers, which they struggled with last year, Indiana that is, and then a toss up with Maryland. So I think the best case is an 8-4, but realistically, I think that 5.5, 6 would be a nice win. And you know what? Maybe you do break through and pull an upset in there. I'm sure Spartan fans would like to get revenge on Michigan after last year and all that took place there.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's just, so, and they always play Penn State tough too in the close, in the season finale. I know the Big Ten has tried to push that as a rivalry, and you know what? It's always competitive. It's always a great game. So, we'll see. But, I'd say all things considered, best ceiling possible, 9 wins, but realistic ceiling 7-8. And then realistic outcome 5-6.
I would pay out of pocket for 8-4, like a nice trip down to Nashville, Music City Bowl, just like a middle bowl game. That'd be delightful, Brett. Believe me.
Yeah, because 8-4 off that schedule is either you're knocking off a top 10 team or you're taking care of every other team on the schedule. So that'd be very impressive.
100%. Really quick, just because I'm curious, when do you start your preview magazine? Like when do you do the first stroke on the keyboard? Is it right when the final whistle blows on national championship, or is it? I'm so fascinated with how much work you put into this.
Yeah, well, really, it's a good question. It's really a full year project. I mean, it's every Saturday in the fall. I have 4 TVs set up from noon till 2 a.m. Watching everything I can. It's pretty insane. I'm keeping the Pac-12 networks in business here in Pennsylvania. I'm the only guy out here watching it. But yeah, so every Saturday in the fall, I'm tuned in. I mean, I'm wired in. I write some stuff weekly for various freelance roles across the country. Radio hits every week. And then, yeah, I agree with you. Right when the confetti falls on national title stage is really when I can start to run the season-long numbers, start to roll forward the graphics and the stats. Then you transition into February, March. It's starting to talk to some coaches. Spring ball is happening then. You get to watch as much spring game tape as I can, anything I can get my hands on. Then you get that post-spring run of calls with head coaches and coordinators. That's a little bit more telling because they've been through spring. They have a revised roster update. So that's a great time there. The heavy writing, yeah, March, April, May. I go back and do a rewrite in June and July now, just given all the transfer activity. Yeah. And then it's just the final design in June, July, and then we publish mid-July. So, yeah, but like I said, it's a total one-man show, so I'm doing it all. I'm writing and then editing my own stuff, and so it is a full-year project. And this is the best time of year, though, because it's all published. It's shipped across the country. Now we can do some radio, some podcasts, and that's way more enjoyable. And yeah, I can't wait for the fall to kick it all off again.
I quite literally cannot imagine that because I feel stretched out sometimes, and I do this for one team. I do this for one program, and you're here just doing coast to coast the whole country. So, Brett, really appreciate your time, first and foremost. I mean, God, yeah, we're just catching you in this August, ramping up the football season. But also, hey, anyone at pick6previews.com, guys, it's $20. It is the best $20 you will spend. Get yourself ready for kickoff, which is happening, God, in just less than a handful of weeks here. So, Brett, really do appreciate all your time, your insight, your knowledge. So really, really cannot thank you enough, my man.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. And good luck, Spartans. Good luck 2023. It's a tough division, but I think you're in for an exciting season, and best of luck out there. Still looking to get to East Lansing eventually. It's on the short list. So hopefully we'll make it out there in a couple of years. We'll see. But until then, yeah, thanks for having me, man. Anytime.
It's a great time. Absolutely. Hey, I'm optimistic, but if it all goes, not according to plan, we got basketball season. So, yeah, I'm sure we'll get you into the Pick 6 basketball preview here, Brett. But until then, hey, gang, love every single one of you guys. Go enjoy the rest of your week. Go Green.